Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. And welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast. It's 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. Thank God for federal holidays and my co-host being on second shift so we could squeak one out this week. Yeah. But if I sound like I have a frog in my throat, I had an allergy attack this morning, which is kind of like, what else is new, Phil? You and your seasonal allergies. It's been 7 years of y'all listening to me croak through morning shows because of this. So, you know, it's a thing. Blame the weather.
Is it seasonal allergies when it happens all year round?
Down here, yeah. As a matter of fact, because, you know, we only have like 2 seasons. It's summer and hurricane season. Maybe like a little... We don't... See, Louisiana's funny. Like, we get this thing we call winter, but it's not really winter because it almost never snows and almost never ices, and it's not really cold for very long. And even when it's cold during the middle of the day, it gets, you know, pretty reasonable. I mean, you came down here in the cold time of year and you were walking around in shorts. So, you know.
It's supposed to be 90 tomorrow. It's going to be miserable here.
What is the high today? 94, probably with 120% relative humidity. You know.
It's 55 right now.
I don't know. This is the time of year you have to open your gills up so you can breathe while you walk around. Real feel 103 degrees.
I like that. I like the real feel because I'm like, it's 103 degrees.
Oh, you know? According to my weather app, it is 92% indoor humidity, dangerously humid. I didn't know humidity could be dangerous until I lived on the Gulf Coast.
The news channel down here, they started using the word oppressive when it comes to like humidity and like the heat and stuff like that. I'm like,
everything is about oppression these days. I swear to Christ.
Yeah. But yeah, happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
I mean,
happy Father's Day to your pops and your uncle.
Someone asked me, so I introduced my dad to night vision this past weekend.
Oh.
And we were talking about, I was like, let's go coyote hunting. And then he was like, well, how, you know, he goes, how you're going to aim and stuff? And I said, well, you can shoot passive, like through the nods, and I was showing him. Then I said, or you could just turn on the IR laser, and and then he was talking to somebody. We were at a wedding for a cousin of mine, and someone was like, yeah, so what are you getting for Father's Day? And he was like, well, I'm hoping to get a new set of nods. I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Sorry. No, but yeah, no, it was fun. But I sent him a meme instead, and it said, let me pull it up real quick. So I showed it to him, and I said, "Here's your Father's Day gift." And it had to do with me not being married and being single and everything. So it worked out.
Why does my camera look blurry all of a sudden?
Autofocused on something.
There we go.
I feel like you just did like one of those transitions on TikTok.
No, it's called tricks. TikTok, it's called tricks of the trade, everybody. When your webcam suddenly starts misbehaving, you just you give it a little love tap and it resets itself.
Do you do a lot of webcam work, Phil?
No, if I would do more if anybody would pay me for it, but nobody's paying to see what I got going on. I'm not able to sell my body for gun stuff like you are.
Speaking of that, I got to donate plasma today.
Well, I'm glad I could be helpful and remind you.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into it. Unless you guys, I mean, it just recently happened, not too long ago, but for some reason the IRS is in the job of confiscating 4473's now. I've seen a couple reports that the IRS or the ATF was on scene. But I've seen more reports than none, or more reports than that, saying no, ATF was not on scene, and that it was just the IRS. And basically, um, so basically, the individual, it's Tom Van Hoos. He owns the Highwood Creed Outfitters in Great Falls, Montana. According to this article, he pulled into work Wednesday morning and he found 20 heavily armed IRS Criminal Investigation Division agents swarmed around his store. Basically, and they pulled people away as far away from Denver and Idaho to serve this warrant. And they basically they stated that he's been uh, improperly basically reporting his income, and they're saying it's up to millions of dollars. And
Mm-hmm.
the guy in this article, the guy's like, well, no, that's false, because anybody who knows anybody knows that if you're in the gun industry and you own a store, you're not you're not making millions and millions of dollars. But
Not just that, but like everybody that knows anybody in the gun community, in the firearms sales or accessory sales, knows that this is an industry you don't play games with the federal government, because they have a bad habit of putting people in prison for life.
yeah, yeah, and the scary thing though is, according to what this guy says, is so he's been in business for 13 years. So they confiscated 13 years of 4473's. This guy says on average he conducts almost 2,000 4473's a year.
Hmm.
And so it's like, well, why? Because they don't have uh they have no 4473's have zero financial
Mm-mm.
information on them. And
Nope.
so,
They're the only thing it
why?
does is link that gun that like the only thing it does is link a firearm purchaser to that store. But
Mhm.
there's no way to determine from a 4473, because like you and I were talking about this yesterday, and I've been rolling it around in my head, because like I have a tiny bit of familiarity with IRS and taxes and all that stuff, and I've been reaching for some kind of justification. You know what I'm saying? Like, play devil's advocate with me. But there's nothing on the 4473 that that intones state or federal taxes collected, the purchase price of the firearm. So they couldn't use that form to try to backtrack the FFL and say, well, you underreported your income, because there's nothing that amounts to that on the 4473. The only thing it does is link a firearm purchaser and a firearm to that FFL. It's the only thing it does, and it's the PII of potentially hundreds of thousands of firearm owners. Because we all know what goes on at 4473. It's everything needed for an FBI background check, which incidentally is also everything needed to steal your identity, which gives me a warm fuzzy. But
I
please
mean,
continue.
I just wonder if they. I mean, one of the, I guess, conspiracy, the tinfoil hat in me, uh, kind of thing makes me wonder. It's like, well, but if they have the 4473's, if they can go through and they can match multiple firearms, all kinds of stuff to a certain individual, but then they can go back, and if they can cross reference that person, like how many firearms they're purchasing and the cost of firearms and all this stuff, and then basically, I don't, I mean, I'm stretching, I'm really stretching here, but if they can sit there and they can match, say they find that over the last 13 years you've bought 100 guns from him or something, and these guns cost have a certain amount of cost, but then they look at, if they pull up your records and they're like, well, Phil only says that he only makes this much this much a year, how is he affording these guns? Or they're looking at as I say, another stretch would be to another stretch could be something like, if they're going after an instructor or they're going after somebody, and they want to sit there and they want to find out what they're buying and all that stuff and what they're writing off, and they can cross reference all that stuff now.
Okay, but let's deal with those two things back to front. If they're going after an instructor that does business there, then you don't need all the 4473s to do that. You go at and you don't also use the power of the IRS to shut down that gun store. You go after the instructor directly. And that can be done through tax record and through the IRS's existing authority. You don't need to shut down the gun store, and you don't need to grab the 4473s. So like I know what we're doing here. We're brainstorming, but like let's pitch that one way out because that doesn't make any
Like I
sense
said,
even on the
well, like
face
I
of it.
said,
But
for like reaching,
on the front face of it, there's a much simpler way to determine if you think any business, not just an FFL, is goofing around with underreporting their taxes. You don't need the 4473's. That's actually the most backwards, asinine way I can think of to try to do this. Which we are talking about the IRS and the federal government, so backwards and stupid is well within bounds. But like, hear me out here. All you really have to do is request or subpoena or demand all their business records. They're going to have a record of every transaction they executed to bring inventory into the store. And then they have to report what their income was based on sales and so on and so forth. So when you look at their books, and if they say, well, we bought, say, $1 million in inventory, we sold it for $1 million, and that's why I don't owe taxes, that is bullcrap on the face of it. And then you audit them and you rip the business apart. Like, that's what the IRS does. You look at the business records and you say, okay, you brought in this much money, you spent this much money. We know it takes revenue and it takes profit margin to run a business. So if these two numbers are not within a certain percentage of each other, this doesn't look right. But you don't get the 4473's for that. That's what I keep saying. There is this whole thing being predicated on an IRS or a tax issue or underreporting of income. Okay, that's what the IRS does. But the moment they grab the 4473's, we're out of bounds because it doesn't make sense. There's nothing you can determine from running the business, from reporting taxes accurately or reporting income accurately or reporting losses accurately. Although you really shouldn't be having a loss in the FFL business these days if you're pricing your stuff appropriately. Like if you put anything on the shelf, it'll move. You know what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
But even then, none of that is involved with the 4473's. That's the part of this that I get really wound up about because the grabbing the 4473's makes no sense unless it was just the IRS flexing authority, which
And that,
is
yeah,
again, yeah, that part is not out of bounds. But if what they're looking for is a justification, which by the way, Congress is now involved in this, and
I will
Congress
somewhere.
Congress is about as aggravated as an unwiped butt right now about the IRS and the ATF and all this executive branch overreach. So,
I
do I
mean,
think it's going to go anywhere? No, but do I think that the director of the IRS is about to have a very uncomfortable moment standing in front of Congress? Probably.
but I mean, that's the thing though. So really quick, I just want to say that according to this article, not only did they take 4473's, but they say he says it took about 10 hours to download all of his records, from the point of sale software information, uh, collected the 4473's, 13 years of 4473's, forms, and copied his firearm acquisition and disposition book.
Yeah,
So, like, I mean, that's a lot of information that they took. And then, so
but
this guy, he was concerned over the handling of the transactions, the records. He called the ATF area supervisor that he has a relationship with, and I guess apparently the guy told him not to initially told him don't turn over any of the records because they have no financial information. And then apparently this guy spoke to somebody over, or I mean on scene or whatever, and the agent was like, "Yeah, you need to turn those over." So, but that's the thing though, and going back to your comment about Congress, and that's the thing I'm sick of is you have Congress that they talk really really mean and they talk really really sternly to the ATF director and like the IRS, and they question very sternly and they make really good points, and everything, but nothing gets done.
nope,
As
because
soon as
that is
as soon as everything's over, as soon as the hearing is over, it gets swiped under the rug with another news story, and these politicians, whether they're on the right or the left, or they care about the people or not, they go on with their day, and they like you don't hear anything more about it, and then they don't bring any more fuss, they don't do anything, and that's what I'm tired of. Is if they're really sick of this, they should stop all actions, like all movement of any bills, nothing should move forward until these certain like these number like these items get addressed. Like why are these why is the ATF, FBI, why are these three letter agencies being weaponized against the people? And why, like, if you want to stop it from happening, stop, like, put a foot down and stop all bills. Nothing gets done. No movement until the stuff gets addressed.
And see, the audio listeners can't see me over here grinning because Andrew's right on the money. Like in this weird relationship, first of all, like, let's accept that there is such thing as the bureaucratic state. Anybody that disagrees with that, you just dig into it a little bit and then come back and talk to me later. But like the bureaucratic state literally exists to insulate these freaking mouthpieces from the consequences of their agency's actions. So yes, the worst that could happen is they might have to go stand in front of Congress and get a talking to. But no, there will not often be any serious consequences because those SESs work at the behest of the executive branch. And as long as you're in lockstep with the propaganda that your particular propagandist is preaching or advocating for, you're pretty much bulletproof because you serve at the pleasure of the president. And he is very happy to see 4473 seized and rights get stomped as long as it's within his agenda. So he's not going to do anything against this IRS director. It's not going to happen. Probably get a pat on the back, maybe even a reach around. I mean, there'll be some kind of feel good involved, but there's going to be no consequences. Congress doesn't have the authority to fire an SCS from an executive branch cabinet level agency that I'm aware of, unless there's some kind of rulemaking I've never heard of. But I don't know everything, but I know a fair bit about the inner workings of this nonsense. I'm not aware of any mechanism that would allow Congress to fire a director of an agency. So the only real pressure point Congress has is, you were saying, like, don't let any bills go through, but there is another mechanism here that unfortunately Congress, I don't think, has the spine to use, and that's power of the purse. Literally tell an agency, if you don't quit effing around, I'm going to strip your operating budget until you can't breathe. Like, imagine if you took the IRS, they just got enough money for 87,000 more IRS agents, by the way, that are
Thanks,
armed.
McCarthy.
Oh, yeah, and they're all armed. If that doesn't just scare
Yeah.
the holy Christ out of you, I don't know what to tell you. But imagine if Congress said, you know what, I don't like the idea of you kicking down the door of a firearms retailer and taking their 4473's. So I'm going to strip your budget so deep you can barely operate. You can't even afford to pay for the gas cards to send people out into the field to do this crap. Those 87,000 IRS agents you wanted, good luck finding money to pay them. Don't know where that money's going to come from. Gut the agency financially. That has always been Congress's ability to rein in three-letter agencies, but they won't use it. And they haven't, that I'm aware of, in my lifetime. Like, everybody hears about this whole thing, like the power of the purse, the power of the purse. Congress has to sign off on these budgets, these budget authorizations, and they have the ability to literally, line item by line item, gut them to the bone. They have the ability to do it. They had the ability to do it last time. They didn't do it. They're not going to, I don't think.
No, there's too many special interests, and that's the thing is,
Well,
I mean, you have like the whole debt ceiling fiasco that just passed. I mean, they had right
thank you,
then.
McCarthy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is McCarthy he said, "Oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this," and he freaking backed out, and he's a piece of shit. Like he completely backed down again, like backed down, and he coattailed, and he gave up on the American people when he said he was going to do the complete opposite. Which honestly, that's a politician. I didn't expect him to do anything more, but when he sits there and he says, "Oh, we're going to do this, this, and this," it's like, well, come on, like. You said, according to your words, where it's, basically he was talking about how it's going to be a completely different, there's going to be a different house because now he's speaker and all this stuff.
Uh-huh.
Nothing's changing. You got what you wanted. You got some backdoor hand job, and it's like it's not doing anything for the people, and that's what's annoying, and that's the whole power of the purse. Like, shut down the government. I was hoping for the debt ceiling. I was hoping for that day to come, and they were going to hit a wall. Like, we need that. There needs to be a correction, and it needs to start there. Like, fire every single one of them. That's what's ridiculous about this is they sit there and they armed 87,000 agents. Yeah, defund the ATF, defund the IRS, defund the FBI. Like, we have our domestic problem, a domestic terrorism problem is the government, not the people.
You want to hear something that's going to really get you even more wound up about this whole situation since we've stumbled into the debt ceiling and that whole thing and government shutdowns? See, within the government, there are multiple pots of people as it comes to essential workers, if you'll forgive that phrase from COVID times. So, within the government, when the government shuts down, there are non essential personnel who will basically go home without a paycheck until the government reopens. And hopefully, Congress, as they have always in the past, Congress will pass a package to back pay those employees because it wasn't their fault necessarily that the government shut down. It was Congress's fault. Or Congress's inability to work together like adults, we'll say. So that's one pot of people. Then there's another pot of people that have to continue to work without a paycheck until the government reopens, because these are people like TSA agents, food inspectors, Border Patrol, Customs. You see where I'm going with this? These are people like, if these people go home, really bad stuff happens very immediately. So these people will literally continue to show up to work. And like the last shutdown we had that was 2.5 weeks long, I think it was, in the Trump administration, those people literally missed a paycheck, but still had to continue to put gas in their tank to show up to work, not knowing when they were going to get paid again. Now, we kind of know this. When you become a federal employee, you sign on for this kind of thing. You go into it knowing these things can happen, and if you're in this pot, you should plan ahead, have a little bit of a buffer just in case some crazy crap cooks off. But then, other than these two groups of people who either work or don't work and don't get paid till the shutdown's over, there's a third pot. This third pot continues to get paid even during even when the government is shut down because they've hit the debt ceiling and they don't have any money. They keep getting paid on time, I might add, because they are exempt from the shutdowns. Take a wild guess who's in that group.
Let me guess. They get to vote on their own raises, and then they also are exempt from anything that happens because they can vote on their own stuff.
Yeah. Congress, Supreme Court, not that they're involved in this, but Congress, the executive branch, president, White House, yeah, they're exempt. So at a time when every other federal employee is up to their eyeballs in problems financially because they're not getting a paycheck and they don't know how long it's going to be before they get another one, and at a time when the entire country is just gnashing their teeth and screaming in the streets because these bunch of spoiled toddlers won't friggin' find compromise, whether or not they should, the people who were actually responsible for keeping, for finding these compromises and making things work out are exempt from the consequences of their own actions.
Right.
Now,
and so that's why they're not in a rush.
Why would they be?
Right.
I mean, I just love to drop that on people just to watch their blood boil. Because I'm like, what? You really thought that the government wasn't going to give themselves a get-out-of-jail-free card so they wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of their own inaction?
But
that's what government does.
Right. But that's the thing, though, is I don't care what side of the aisle. I don't care if you're left, right, independent, libertarian. I don't care what you identify as far as your political leaning. If you cannot visibly see and you are not upset and you don't get upset over the weaponization of these government agencies against the people, or the fact that how much the people are getting hosed on from every single angle, from basically every department in the government, I don't understand where you're coming from, or what planet you're living on. If you cannot find some wrong in the government, if you're somebody who's, I don't care if you say, well, all guns are bad and only government should have firearms, all this stuff. Okay, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. But at the same time, if you can't take that and then you can't get upset over something else, if you can't get upset over something else, like such as the Congress that's exempt from the shutdown, and so you might know somebody that's a federal employee and they're getting their house might be getting foreclosed on because they can't pay their bills because of the government shutdown, but yet the employees, Congress, they're actually they make what 3, 4, 5 times, if not more, than some of these these other federal employees, but they're exempt from it. Like if you can't find something, like if you, I don't, like I said, I don't care what side you're on. If you like, there's something that affects every single one of us, and like that's why I'm saying like the government has done a great job over the last, call it, say 50 years, if not longer, dividing the people amongst each other. Like it's a divide and conquer scheme. That's all this is. They keep us arguing amongst each other so that they can sit there, move in the background, and they can and do what they want. They don't want us to live together and work together and see what they're doing as criminals. They don't want to see that. They don't want us to see that. But but not enough people do it. They're too concerned about, well, I'm getting my money and I'm getting my cut, and this person's bad for wanting to own this thing and whatever. I'm like, the government itself is bad. Like, I don't understand why you can't see that. Yes, you're okay. You might be getting a paycheck or you might be getting food stamps from them, but that's why they're buying you. They're paying you off to shut up. The government is it's a modern day mob. It's a mobster organization.
I think a lot of the root problem there, though, is that, like, well, I mean, we could sum that up with just two words: political tribalism, and leave it at that. But I really feel like the root problem here is that there was a time in this country where everyone had a very cohesive, shared set of values. Everybody had a very shared national identity. Like, no matter where we came from, no matter what our opinions were, we were all Americans, and we all viewed each other at default favorably. You know what I'm saying? Like, we could disagree on things. We could not see eye to eye on things. We could say, you see this issue this way and I see this way. But at the end of the day, we all viewed each other as misguided at the worst, not as evil. And then somewhere along the way, we tripped into this weird alternate reality where if you disagree with this point, it is because you're evil, it is because of malice, it is because of racism or homophobia or bigotry or whatever other term you want to put on it. It was this is kind of like a conversation I had a with a friend of mine, a coworker, years ago when Trump was elected. And I really feel like that was a watershed moment for me and him, because like my politics are not not hard to figure out. Like, I'm an anarcho-libertarian. I'm just about as far right as you can get on most issues. And to me, far right means like I think government should be about this big and do very little. And far left being government should run your life, nanny state, security state. And he is definitely like left of center. So we don't agree on a lot of social and political issues. But we've never viewed each other in an adversarial way because he's a friend of mine. He's a fellow military veteran. He's a father. He's like he and I have so much in common in addition to our employment that we're friends. We're good friends. I've helped him fix cars for God's sakes. We've gone to the range together. But it was at that moment where he was stuck in this emotional place where, like, on the one hand, well, everybody that votes for Trump is racist, but Phil voted for Trump, and I know Phil's not. So he had to rectify those two things together. And it was like he told me one time, he said, I'm forced to admit that you see something in this decision between Trump and Clinton. You see something in this decision I don't. And it's not because you just hate black people, because that cannot be the answer, because it doesn't apply to you. But you see something here I don't. And I was like, exactly. And there's a lot of people in the world that is the only difference between the two of us is I see something you don't. I see something differently. I see a different point of view. I prioritize things differently. Doesn't mean we're bad people. It doesn't mean you're bad people. It just means we see something differently. But again, because he and I have like those shared backgrounds, we view each other as, I'm assuming no malice on your part for making this decision. But as a country, we don't do that anymore. As a country, it's very much based on your color, your gender, your creed, your whatever, I view you as default bad. And then you have
Hmm.
to convince me you're a good person by agreeing with me on these things. And the moment that, I don't know when exactly that little change happened, but the minute it did, things started getting bad real fast. So, how do we put that genie back in the bottle? Damned if I know.
You don't. It's too late. I mean, it's I the like I've said it before. It's there's too many there's too many people for the government to handle. There's too many interests. There's too many special interest groups pulling the government in all certain directions. It's not. It's got to stop, and it won't. And the ultimate and what's going to ultimately happen is, I mean, look at Rome and look at every major power. If you look back in history, every major power fell from within, and and because I mean, yeah, things were going great, but just things politically started falling apart from inside. Special interests pulling, all kinds of different ways. Like bad decisions started being made, and it fell from within. And I believe that's what's happening with us. I truly believe that that's what's happening in the United States. I mean, they say the average empire lasts around 250 years, and we're actually coming up on that. We're not many years away from that at all. And and I mean that's scary because America to me it's the greatest country in the world, but we're really falling out. I mean, it's as far as just the U.S. as a whole. I mean, and I can't believe people are still trying to come here but that also shows you what other people see in the United States, that what they see here. They still see freedom. They still see the ability to make a dream uh, come true for their family, to raise their kids. There's a reason why a lot of immigrants try to come here and actually and have their children on soil to make sure that they're U.S. citizens for a reason. And to me, that still makes our country great, but we need to change things up. It's not sustainable for what we're doing right now. Our government, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problem here though is that like our government has done what most governments do and consolidated power. They've
Hmm.
tried to do they've tried to do more than any bureaucracy is capable of. Like the way our country was originally set up was, like I said earlier, like for the federal government to be about this big and not do very much. And that works because it allows individual states the autonomy and then individual cities and localities the autonomy to handle local issues in a local way with local consequences. Because, like, you and I've had this conversation all the time. Like, imagine if the mayor of your town had the same authority that the governor or the president did within the bounds of his town. He would have a baked in incentive not to push any policies that were wildly unpopular because he's got to live in that town. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like, he doesn't want to deal with angry voters in the grocery store or at the barber shop or at church or just randomly while he's driving around town and somebody starts cursing him out because he did something stupid. But when you remove the power from that locality, when you put it in Washington, D.C., behind these tall walls and all these armed guards, then that mayor gets to say, they did it, not me, whether or not that's the case. Bureaucracy only exists to isolate people from to grant people power and then isolate them from the consequences of using that power. That's the only purpose of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy excels at doing few things that are very, very similar quickly. Not well, not with an individual touch, not with a fair hand, just quickly. So, like, the bureaucratic state has no incentive to serve the people at all. Doesn't even factor into the bureaucratic state's thinking. And by having the power consolidated at the federal level and kind of offshored away from these small towns, they have no incentive whatsoever to be had to keep the voters happy, or even just even just like abide by the will of the voters. There's too many layers in this bureaucracy to shed that off. So I
And
think the way to fix this is for the federal government to relinquish that power back to the states and the localities and the individuals and do less and stop
they won't.
trying to do more. I know they're not
No,
going
they
to,
won't.
but I'm
They
just,
won't because I mean they're power hungry. I mean, like Does the do you remember about the August 1971? You remember you've read about the Stanford prison experiment?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where they
Stud-
had
Studied it in college psychology, one of the most terrifying
yep,
moments of my life.
yeah, and it's pretty interesting because they had a group of individuals come in, and you could either be a security guard or a prisoner, and 6 days it took. It was 6 days, and the guy who was running it terminated it because the people who were the guards who were role playing as the guards, the mistreatment of the role players who were the prisoners were so bad that he terminated the experiment because basically that power went to the people's head. It went to the quote unquote the guards, the role players who are the guards. And that's exactly to me, that's exactly what's happening here is with our government at every single level. And you know it they've completely let the power go to their head. And that's the thing is they can sit there and they you know you send a representative to Congress to the House, you know, to say, hey, like represent our needs, represent my district. And they go and then they're so far away and so far detached. Like, yeah, they might come back to and they might talk every once in a while, have like a press conference, they might hold a town hall or something like that. But there's no other consequences. They can still go back to DC and they can just point and be like, well, they want to try this, but my special interests are this. They don't care. And that's the thing is we need to take the power away from the government. And the only way there's and honestly there is zero way that we can do that. We can try to vote them out, but if you look at but that's the thing is then they have the districts where they redraw the districts so that they get back in power when they because they have the special interest groups that pay off the people that are in poverty and they get money from it, or they promise certain things, student loan forgiveness. Like that's pretty much how Biden got elected. Besides, a lot of dead people voting for him too, but that's how like he pushed the student loan forgiveness like crazy. I heard so many. I read so many snippets and comments from students saying that's the only reason they're voting for him.
How'd
Zero other
that work
reason.
out for them?
Yeah, but even then, even if he did do the student loan forgiveness, like say it was granted by like 'cause it's getting heard by the Supreme Court actually this month sometime. Say they're like, you know what, Biden, you can do that, and so he forgives $20,000 in loans to individuals. Our government, our economy, our country is still in the freaking hole. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
how did that work out for you? Okay, you're yeah, cool. You got your student loans forgiven, but how does that work? How is that helping anybody, any of
They
us
don't
at
care.
all? No.
They don't care. It's a payday for them. It's absolution for their own poor financial decisions in the past that they don't feel like they should be held responsible for because whatever reason, whatever inane reason they can come up with. But I feel like there are two things we've danced around here. Is like there is a mechanism here for the people to take back control of the country, and that's a convention of states. Not that I'm holding my breath on that one, because that would involve a lot of governors pulling their pants out of their butt and actually doing their jobs and asserting to the federal government, the adults are back in charge. Y'all are going to sit on the sidelines. But I'm not holding my breath on that one. And the other thing is, like, yeah, the Stanford prison experiment, I mean, it doesn't give me a lot of hope for human nature because it pretty clearly shows that when you give anyone unchallenged authority, they're almost predisposed to abuse it. Like, that's the whole argument. That's my whole argument against communism. Like, communism, socialism works perfectly on paper, in theory, if you have a person who is incorruptible and will always distribute resources appropriately and fairly and not weigh the scale down a little bit to tip themselves a little bit extra because they are your better. In that scenario, then yeah, socialism works perfectly, but there's no one that's incorruptible. And when you give somebody all the resources of the state and all the power of the state, almost anyone would be corrupted by that level of power. So that's why socialism, communism always ends up with people starving, while the party members, the loyalists, eat cake in their high towers behind their high walls. But in this country, in this situation, we have this funny little thing called the right to keep and bear arms, which means that In this version of the Stanford prison experiment, the inmates are armed, so there's only so much you can put your foot on their neck. It's like I've said before. Like I wrote an article forever ago, and I'm sure it's probably on MOF.com. If not, I need to go try to dredge it up. But I wrote it and I said that the Second Amendment is the loudest quiet threat ever written. It is a constant reminder to the government, like just so you remember, all these peaceful people over here still have the ability to freaking kick your ass out of Congress if you piss them off bad enough. You know what I'm saying? It's the panic button. It is the constant noose hanging from the gallows to remind our betters there's only so far you can push the people before they push back, and they will always have the means to push back. Which probably is a good way to dovetail into this case you and I were talking about right before we went on, where someone has now decided that the inaction of Congress to legislate civilian ownership of firearms out of existence is not working, so now they're trying to use the judicial branch to accomplish that.
Right, and that's the thing, and you wonder why these groups who are paid behind the curtain by whether it's Soros or anti-gun politicians or the state, whatever it is, to be pushing the anti-gun agenda. They're pushing so hard for our Second Amendment right to be stripped from us, to be so regulated, and to be so basically what's the word I'm looking for? But basically, they're trying to regulate so much that we can't fight back, or
they're trying to tip the balance of power.
Right, because the government, I really do feel like the government, as much as we don't think so, I really feel like the government still fears the people, because the ability that we do have the firearms, and we do have like the ability to, if we wanted to, we could. If we could all come together, we could actually do some take something back, and I feel like the government does fear that. But so that's why they've been trying over the last, at least the last 10 years, if not longer, to strip the Second Amendment away from the people. And like you said, they are failing at Congress. So yeah, so they're trying to push it to where now, hey, this guy who was hell bent on evil, or this person who was hell bent on evil or whatever, they went through and they killed a lot of children. Okay, that's sad. That's wrong. But because Congress won't act, the parents or the people can now sue the firearms manufacturer for this cause. Which, it's like, I don't sue the freaking the manufacturer, whoever made the spoon. I don't sue them for making me fat. Like, you can't do that. I can't sue Ford. I can't sue, like, unless something actually, like, unless like the braking system goes out in the brand new vehicle that I just bought, like, I can't sue Ford. I can't sue, like, if I went and got my brakes done at a shop and all of a sudden my brakes go out, I can't sit there and be like, you know what, shop, you know what, I found out that you did a crappy job and you actually installed all my stuff wrong. You're liable. But I'm going after Ford because they're a bigger target. They got more money than you. So I'm going after them. Like, and
Yeah.
you. So, like, you can't do that. But they're
And
trying to make
specifically, yeah, and specifically what we're talking about right now is, I don't remember the particulars on the case, but there's a case that is trying to challenge the PLCAA, which gives firearms manufacturers and I believe retailers basically immunity from prosecution if their products are being misused. So when somebody takes a Bushmaster and goes out and does dumb, horrible things with it, you can't go back and sue the manufacturer or the seller unless you can show where, like Andrew's, use an analog, unless the firearm failed in some mechanical way, which would be a product liability issue, or if, like, you can prove the FFL sold to a prohibited person. But there's already laws in place to dictate all that behavior. What anti-gun interests are doing right now is they're trying to end run around the PLCAA to say that anytime a firearm is misused, we can go after the manufacturer. And it's a pretty, I mean, it's a pretty slimy tactic because it is only based in this idea that if we can just continue to hit these manufacturers and these FFLs with big lawsuits, that they are compelled to get a lawyer involved in and spend the money and the court costs and the fees and everything. But if we continue to tie them up with these big lawsuits, eventually we'll just drive them out of business.
Look at
It's yeah, I mean it's the most
exactly
malicious
what happened.
it's the most malicious abuse of the judicial system to literally just like have a line of people that sue a place until they go out of business paying lawyers, but that's literally what they're trying to do. And a big company like Remington, like you could argue they should have enough money and enough lawyers on retainer, but you start going after small mom and pop FFLs, you're going to drive them out of business almost immediately because, like, Andrew alluded to earlier, like the margins of firearms are not what people think they are, and a lot of these small FFLs, they're not making money hand over fist. They're paying for inventory and paying for employees and keeping the lights on and maybe putting a couple of bucks back for a rainy day. Like, unless you're doing like hundreds of thousands of transfers, you're just not making that much money at it. So when you have to come out of pocket like 8 to 12 grand just to get a lawyer to advise you and write a letter to respond to something, and then when you have to put one on retainer to defend you from every frivolous lawsuit backed up by some large anti-gun interest, it gets crippling almost immediately. And I think that's what concerns me about all this is there's a principle involved here that common sense would dictate there's no justification for this suit, and that's why the PLCAA exists, is so that we can't have like any town or Moms Demand Action backing up an individual to sue, and then when that suit goes nowhere because it never should have, there's no consequence for it. Like in my world, if you allege a frivolous lawsuit, then you get stuck with the court fees, and that has happened once or twice. But the problem is the individual who's actually alleging the suit, who was backed up by that big organization, the minute the suit goes out, they dip, and that individual doesn't have 80 to 100 grand to pay the big corporation's lawsuit. So who pays? It's this weird little scheme that they've cooked up where they're literally just trying to bankrupt the firearms industry via judiciary action and via frivolous lawsuits. And I'm not amused. It's not cute. It's pretty friggin' slimy. And for the fact that there's a judge right now that is trying to allow that 30-round magazines are not an intrinsic part of an AR-15. Don't know how you figure that. They've been an intrinsic part of the damn weapon since like the 1960s. But he's trying to shave those magazines out of the equation so that people can sue for the magazine but not the firearm. It's like,
I mean, you're pulling hairs. You're pulling individual hairs right now. But that's the thing, though, is you pull enough threads on it. You pull enough threads, and eventually, the whatever you're pulling on is going to fall apart. And that's what they're hoping for is to pull enough threads, and then it goes away, and they can't get they're afraid to do a 30-round magazine. They're afraid to do whatever because they're going to get sued, and people, that's their livelihood, and it's paying for their employees, and it's keeping lights on their house. So they're not going to sit there and do it. So they're going to cut back on all kinds of stuff. And that's the thing is, what gets me is they sit there and they're like, okay, we're going to try to go after the firearms industry for doing this, but yet the government puts restrictions on people who can't sue. You cannot sue the pharmaceutical industry. Like how is that accurate? Like the whole COVID and stuff like that. Like there's clauses, they put stuff in like the protection so that people could they couldn't go after these pharmaceutical the companies and stuff that were doing the COVID shots and stuff like that. And like it's ridiculous. So if you can go after one, I say mount up and start applying it to other parts of the industry. I don't care. Like I don't care what it is. If they start going after the firearms industry, I want people to start mounting up and going after the car industry. Start suing the crap out of the industry. Start suing the crap out of the pharmaceuticals. Like, Just apply it everywhere. And if one
I'll do you
passes,
one better.
pass.
If we're gonna do away with the PLCAA, do away with qualified immunity.
Yeah.
Gone, goodbye. Like when a cop does something dumb that he's not supposed to do, and I love my law enforcement officers out there that are trying to do the right thing, but y'all have some people in y'all's ranks that are doing dumb shit that deserve to get prosecuted on an individual level in qualified immunity. And while we're on that subject, why not be able to sue a congressperson individually and directly if they sign off on a law that is later found to be unconstitutional? Like if we're going to make the argument that these legal protections are inappropriate because they shield a wrongdoer from the consequences of the harm they're doing, okay, then let's apply that across the board. Let's get rid of let's get rid of big pharma's immunity. Let's get rid of qualified immunity. Let's allow the people to sue, not just sue the government, not sue their lawyers, which by the way are paid for with the tax dollars of the people who are doing the suing. But let's let people say, I want Joe Biden's ass in this seat, and I want to sue him individually for something. And if he is found guilty, then I want him to pay individually directly, not out of the government slush fund, which is paid for by tax dollars. Like, this is the annoying part of when you sue the city, you know where the money for the settlement comes from, right? It comes from your daggum pocket, because that's the only money the government has, is the money they taxed from you. So even when the government is found guilty by the government, which if you can't tell by my tone doesn't happen terribly often, they pay you with your own money. So anyway,
And then they raise taxes.
Yeah, they raise taxes because the government's not. The government is like it's like a mob-run casino. They don't lose, and if they do lose, they find a way to win anyway. And when they lose, it embarrasses them, and they find a way to get even. Like, I hate to talk about my own government in terms like they're a criminal enterprise, but they have all the same hallmarks. I don't know what to tell you. It just is the way it is. God, I don't know how I'm not on every federal watch list there is. I probably am. I don't know, Andrew. Can you think of any like government watch lists that you and I aren't on?
I don't know. So far, I can still fly, so it's not that bad. But
I haven't tried to fly. I haven't tried to fly since the last time I was in Iraq. So, Oh no.
Before we start wrapping up, what do you think about? What's your thoughts on this comment?
Give me a second. I'm rolling this around in my brain box. Allowing cigarette makers to be sued for causing cancer. I would argue that in that case, there are some specific instances where some cigarette manufacturers were alleging that like their light cigarettes or their ultralights were a healthier alternative. And in that case, I'm kind of like, maybe that's like I think in that case that might be an issue where like a false claim was made or false advertising. But that being said,
see, my thing though is as soon as they put warning labels on all their stuff, smokeless tobacco, whatever it is, as soon as they put warning labels on their stuff saying, "Hey, this may cause cancer," you're assume all liability. Like I don't think cigarette companies, I don't think tobacco companies should be able to get sued at all for this stuff.
But my question is, did that happen before or after this lawsuit? Because that, like, most of this happened when I was either not born or so young, I don't remember it.
Right.
So that, I guess.
I know. I mean, I agree. I agree. Like before when these cigarette companies and the big tobacco and all that stuff were pushing cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, whatever it is, whatever, like when the way they were pushing it, and they're pushing how like healthy and how this was, it didn't do this, it didn't do this, how our light cigarettes are better and all this stuff, like false advertisement and deceiving of the people and all that stuff. Yeah, they deserve to get sued because they never, like, to my knowledge, they didn't have like the warning labels and all that stuff like they do today. I mean, granted, yeah, it happened a long time ago. I kind of remember the war on like tobacco a little bit, but I know now, like half the package is covered by a warning label saying this may cause cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I don't think you should be able to sue the cigarette, the tobacco, big tobacco, because I got cancer. You assume the risk. It's common knowledge nowadays that this may and can cause cancer. It might not, but it can. You assume all liability. Just like when I do buy a firearm, I assume the liability of that firearm and that the cause or the harm that it may cause. And if I do something and I harm somebody else, the blame is on me. It's not the firearm. Just like a vehicle, it's everything. It's literally, we can apply it like this. Humans are, we don't want to take the blame for everything. We don't want to take blame for anything. And so you run over a group of people and you say, "Oh, my brakes failed," and they say, "Well, no, they didn't," because they had the car inspected and say, "No, they didn't," and you're found guilty. Um, like, you assume the responsibility of that. Like, that was on you. That wasn't the car. It wasn't the gun. It wasn't the spoon that made you fat. You're the one that sat there and ate a tub of ice cream every night in front of the TV. Like,
You keep talking about spoons making people fat. I'm gonna start to feel personally attacked, brother.
or you know, no, but that's the thing the people, we need to start taking responsibility for our actions, and and no, and they don't want to, and that's the issue. And once we start doing that, I think we can fix some stuff. What's that? 65 federal warning labels on tobacco. Yeah, that was way before my time.
Yeah, it was a little before my time, just a little bit. I mean, we
But
are
when
both
was that?
millennials.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that, I guess I'd have to look it up. But when was that? When was the lawsuit for that? Then was that pre 65 or was that after 65? Because honestly, if it was after 65 and federal warning labels on tobacco, I don't think they should be able to get sued.
I
Like,
don't
I think that
either.
it's the person's responsibility.
So what I'm hearing from this is that to reinforce the PLCAA, what we need to do is put a big old sticker on the box that every firearm comes in that says, "Warning: This might murder you," and then
Yeah,
like that's it. You've been warned.
yeah.
Although I don't know how long it's been since, well, you've purchased a firearm much more recently than I have, but have you ever noticed that inside of the manual that comes with it, there's lots of big one-page warnings about this could kill you, this could kill your dog, this could kill this could kill this could kill people, this could hurt you. Don't stick your thumb inside and drop the bolt. You'll get hurt. Like,
They
it's
come with a
like
manual.
half of the freaking user manual is like legalese. It's lawyer speak. It's this could hurt you. This could mess your day up. This could give you male pattern baldness. This could give you alopecia. Like all sorts of crazy crap. So like I kind of feel like at a certain point, unless we just literally start renaming, like unless we name Smith and Wesson and Ruger's next weapons the Murder Machine 5000 or the People Killer 10,000, like make the name scarier. I guess I don't see a way to make it any more apparent that firearms are dangerous. No crap. That's what they're supposed to be. And if they're not dangerous, then I don't want them. They're not working properly. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's roll this one out. You have stuff to do. I have to
Yeah.
go reload
Yeah,
this
it'll
coffee
work.
cup so I can finish waking up. And we'll catch everybody in another week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
I have to find the outro. Dadgummit.